Okay, let's dive into something you've probably wondered about. Why is it you can always find another t-shirt, no problem, but getting a ticket to a sold-out show, it feels impossible, right? No matter what you're willing to pay. Well, it turns out there's this one really powerful economic idea that explains this whole thing perfectly. I mean, really think about it. If some t-shirt design suddenly gets super popular, the company can just, well, they can just make thousands more, right? But what about that sold-out concert? The venue isn't just going to magically get bigger overnight. So that's the puzzle we're going to unpack today. The huge difference between making more t-shirts and trying to add more seats. And the answer, the key to this whole thing, is a concept called elasticity of supply. Now I know, it sounds kind of technical, but trust me, it's way simpler than it seems. All it really does is measure how responsive a producer can be. So when the price of something shoots up, how quickly and how easily can they start making more of it? That's it. That's the core question we're digging into. But here's the cool part. This isn't just some vague idea, you know? Economists can actually put a number on this responsiveness. So let's break down exactly how they do that. All right, here's the key. The formula is actually pretty straightforward. You just take the percentage change in the quantity that's supplied, and you divide it by the percentage change in the price. So let's imagine an example. Say the price of something jumps up by 20%. And in response, the company that makes it cranks up production by 40%. So all we have to do is plug those numbers in. That's 40% divided by 20%, and that gives us 2. A nice, simple number. But what on earth does this 2 actually mean? What does it tell us? Okay, this is the really important part. Any number that's greater than 1 means that the supply is what we call elastic. It just means the quantity they supplied changed by a bigger percentage than the price did. So in our example, their response, that 40%, was literally twice as strong as the price signal. Now that is a very responsive producer. But you know, elasticity isn't just a simple yes or no thing. It's actually a whole spectrum. And there are 5 key types, and they range all the way from total rigidity to basically infinite flexibility. So let's walk through each one. So let's start at one extreme end. This is called perfectly inelastic supply. Here, the elasticity score is a big fat 0. And that means there is absolutely no change in how much is supplied no matter what happens to the price. And boom, this is our concert ticket problem in a nutshell. You can see it right here. The price can shoot way up, but the change in the number of seats, it stays flat at 0. Because, you know, you can't magically make the stadium bigger. The supply is completely fixed. It's perfectly inelastic. All right, next up, we've got relatively inelastic supply. For this one, the elasticity number is somewhere between 0 and 1. So producers do respond to a price change. They just don't respond very strongly. Just look at this. The price bar is way taller than the quantity bar. A great example of this is farming, in the short term. If the price of wheat suddenly shoots up, a farmer can't just snap their fingers and grow more. They have to wait for the next harvest season. Their response is weak or inelastic. Okay, so right smack in the middle of our spectrum is something called unitary elastic supply. This is where the score is exactly 1. It's a perfectly balanced proportional response. And you can see that perfect balance right here. Notice how the bars are the exact same height? A 20% price increase leads to a perfectly proportional 20% increase in quantity. It's a true 1-to-1 reaction. All right, now we're back in familiar territory. This is where the score is greater than 1, relatively elastic supply. And you should be thinking back to our t-shirts here. This is where producers can have a really strong, flexible response. You can see it plain as day. The quantity response just dwarfs the price change. A 20% little bump in price triggers this huge 40% jump in production. And this is classic for manufactured goods, things where factories can just ramp up their output pretty easily. And finally, we get to the other extreme end of the spectrum, perfectly elastic supply. Now, this one is a bit more of a theoretical idea, but it's where producers are willing to supply basically any amount of a good, but only at one very specific price. What this visualizes is a kind of theoretical limit. The slightest increase in price would cause a massive jump in supply, but if the price dropped even a tiny bit, the supply would just vanish completely. It's a way to model a market with, perfect competition where all the products are identical. Okay, so we've covered the what and the how, but what about the why? Why are t-shirts elastic and concert tickets inelastic? Let's take a look at the real-world factors that actually set these rules of the game. It turns out there are a bunch of key things that determine this. Time. Time is a huge one. In the short run, like we said, a farmer can't grow more wheat, but give them a few years in the long run and they can buy more land and totally change things. The nature of the product itself matters a ton, right? It's way easier to make more t-shirts than it is to find more rare diamonds. And then there's other stuff, like do you have spare factory capacity just sitting there ready to go? Can you store your goods in a warehouse? How easy is it to get the resources you need? Even government policies like taxes and regulations can totally change how flexibly a producer can react to a price change. Okay, so that's the theory. But so what? Why does any of this actually matter in the real world? Well, it matters a lot, because this concept is not just for textbooks. It's quietly shaping everything from how businesses operate to the taxes you pay. I mean, businesses absolutely live and die by this stuff. They use it to decide when to ramp up production. But you know who's paying even closer attention? Governments. Have you ever wondered why they slap such heavy taxes on things like gasoline and cigarettes? It's because their supply and their demand is really inelastic. They know that even if the price goes up because of a tax, people are still going to buy them. And that guarantees a steady stream of tax money. So you see, just understanding this one concept starts to reveal the hidden logic behind our whole economy. So let's just boil this all down to a super simple cheat sheet. Remember, if that number is greater than 1, think flexible, think responsive. If it's less than 1, think rigid, slow to change. And if it's exactly 1, that's your perfectly balanced, proportional response. That's pretty much the whole thing in a nutshell. And that brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with. Just look around the room you're in right now. Pick any object, your phone, a coffee mug, the chair you're sitting on. Ask yourself, is its supply elastic or inelastic? And more importantly, why? Once you start looking at the world this way, I promise, you're going to start seeing the concept of elasticity absolutely everywhere.